Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking into a really tough story, heartbreaking, deeply unsettling, and one that's left the community reeling. It's not just the shock of what happened, but the painful questions it forces us to confront. As always, my mission here is to pull out the key insights and the important details from all the sources we've gathered. This isn't just about understanding the timeline, but about exploring why this matters so deeply. What stands out most is how the reports, witness statements, and accounts all weave together, not just into a narrative about one violent incident, but into something bigger, a wound in the community that runs deep. Let's start with the immediate facts. The discovery itself is chilling. It takes us back to August 12th, 2025, a date that should have been entirely different. It was Sabrina Richards' 54th birthday. Instead of a celebration, tragedy struck. Around 5:15 in the afternoon, a call came in to 911. That call came from inside the house, from a 10-year-old boy. He told the dispatcher that his aunt and uncle had been shot. And the boy himself? Well, that's where the horror of this story deepens. He was unharmed, physically at least. The sources make that clear, which, in the middle of such horror, feels like the only small mercy in the entire ordeal. A small mercy, indeed. The location was Lillington, North Carolina, in Harnett County. This was the family's home. When deputies arrived, what they found was utterly tragic. Inside were Pastor Danny Richards, age 57, and his wife, Sabrina, age 54. Both were already deceased at the scene. And there was a third victim, Danny's mother, Clara Richards, 74 years old. She was found critically injured and rushed to the hospital, but she passed away just hours later. 3 members of the same family, all gone in what should have been the safety of their own home. The scale of it is hard to wrap your head around. 3 lives lost in a single moment. It's incredibly heartbreaking. And when you understand who Danny and Sabrina Richards were, the weight of it all becomes even heavier. It adds another layer of tragedy. Danny grew up right there in Lillington, in what sources describe as an ordinary, close-knit town where people waved at each other, held doors open, and looked out for their neighbors. His family didn't have much, but they worked hard and quietly taught him the value of service without ever making a show of it. Even as a boy, Danny had a spark, a natural way with people. Not the kind of leadership that comes from chasing attention, but the kind that shows up in the little things, helping kids fix their bikes, carrying groceries for an elderly neighbor, always stepping up when someone needed a hand. That sense of service stayed with him his whole life. Both he and Sabrina were veterans, retired from the U.S. Army. Danny's career stretched from the late 1980s all the way to 2017. Danny eventually reached the rank of Command Sergeant Major, a significant accomplishment in the Army. Sabrina served as a staff sergeant. That kind of disciplined strength was deeply ingrained in both of them. Sources describe them as disciplined, strong, and trustworthy. When Danny retired from the Army in 2017, he didn't stop serving. He became the senior pastor at Genesis Grace Ministry in Fayetteville, moving from military service to spiritual service. The community's perception of them was overwhelmingly positive. They were respected and loved, veterans with hearts for service. Friends recalled how they would give clothes and food to homeless people straight out of their own home. They simply gave what they had. People called them amazing. Danny, in particular, was described as a very, very nice guy. Their generosity was clear. Their social media showed pictures of them serving the community, as well as enjoying simple moments together, like a dinner out just a couple of days before the tragedy. They lived lives dedicated to others, which makes what happened even harder to process. How could this happen to people like them? And then came the most agonizing twist: the suspect's identity. The alleged perpetrator was their 15-year-old nephew, who was also Clara Richards' grandson. He had been living with Danny and Sabrina, taken in under their care. Sources suggest it was an act of kindness, an attempt to give him a better life, discipline, and wisdom. One source called it a final act of love that ended in tragedy. After the shooting, the boy fled the scene in the family's truck, sparking a manhunt. The truck was found abandoned, and about 3 hours after the initial 911 call, authorities located him in the woods near the highway. He was taken into custody. The charges reflected the gravity of the loss: initially 2 counts of first-degree murder for Danny and Sabrina, plus attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon for Clara. But after Clara died, that attempted murder charge was upgraded to a 3rd count of first-degree murder. At just 15 years old, North Carolina law still allows for the possibility that he could be tried as an adult in cases this severe. Whether that happens will depend on the legal proceedings ahead. As for motive, nothing conclusive had been established at the time of the reports we reviewed. The police investigation was still ongoing. That unanswered question hangs over the whole case. But the sources point out this wasn't just an isolated tragedy. It hit the wider community hard, and it also fits into a deeply unsettling pattern that's been emerging. This is where the story broadens out and raises questions that go far beyond a single household. This wasn't just local news. It became something bigger. Sources described it as more than an incident. It felt like a wound to the community, and to some extent, even a national shock because of the circumstances. One phrase stood out: it shook the ground. In Lillington, the impact was profound. Neighbors who barely knew each other found themselves hugging in church. A small memorial appeared near the house: flowers, wooden crosses, handwritten notes, an outpouring of grief that seemed to spill into every corner of the town. And then came a disturbing parallel. Just a week before, in Statesville, North Carolina, a church leader named Sabrina Burton was shot, allegedly by her nephew, at her own home. She was pronounced dead outside her house. The similarities are chilling. Both victims were church leaders. Both shootings happened in their homes. Both suspects were nephews, and both took place within 1 week in the same state. It's no wonder the sources asked bluntly, what is going on? The people of Lillington are asking that and more. There's a deep yearning for answers, for justice, but also for closure, if that's even possible. Many are worried about the 10-year-old boy who made the 911 call, worried about what he saw, how he'll cope, and what his future holds. Others worry about the church, Genesis Grace Ministry, suddenly without its pastor. The fallout is enormous, and as with any tragedy like this, there's always more to learn. Different perspectives help fill out the picture. It's not just about cold facts, but about the questions those facts force us to ask. How does a community even begin to heal from something like this? So as you reflect on this profoundly sad story, think of the lives we've just walked through. Pastor Danny Richards, Sabrina Richards, and Clara Richards. 3 people whose lives were built on service and generosity, gone in an instant. We've covered the arrest of their teenage nephew, the very person they were trying to help. We've looked at the deep impact on the Lillington community, that shared wound, and the disturbing parallel with the Statesville case just days before. Knowledge is most valuable when we can understand it and maybe apply it. For the Richards family, their legacy seems to live on in the quiet stories people tell of unpretentious kindness, of service without expectation. But there's also the brokenness they bore, both in life and in the way their lives were taken. The grief is immense, but the shock has also forced the community to confront something deeply unsettling, that even the most respected, beloved families can be vulnerable. In Lillington, the tragedy has sparked hard conversations about how to spot hidden signs of distress in young people, even when everything on the surface looks fine and intentions are good. That may be one of the most powerful takeaways, that in the midst of pain, there is still a lesson worth carrying forward. And yet, the lingering questions remain. What cost did Danny and Sabrina pay for trying to raise someone, to give them a better life? Was it enough? And underneath it all, where does forgiveness even fit? Or maybe, as one person reflected with heartbreaking simplicity, how do I love?